Weaponizing migration. Why is Belarus clashing with Poland and European Union? First question is that how refugees enter Belarus, how they came or by whom they brought up here. Regardless of who emerges victorious from the political game that is being played out in Eastern Europe, one outcome is clear. The refugees on the border are and will go through immersible amount of suffering as they remain stranded in freezing temperature and they barely get food and water. Belarus president said that most of the refugees is allegedly smuggling out are original Iraqi Kurds who have flown into the Minsk, that is the capital of Belarus, in the past few months. If we think that how they enter in Belarus, it might be shocking because they didn't really enter Belarus. They were brought here. It was reported that both Belarusian and Iraqi travel agencies were advertising and organizing tourist trips by reducing the price of tours. And if they get such kind of offers, then they must think of traveling and increasing the number of flights that running between two countries, mostly from the three cities in Iraq's Kurdistan region. Belavia Airline, that is the national airline of Belarus, has been reported to have launched flights to Minsk from the three Kurdish cities. In 2019, there were average of 17 flights in a week. Now it's around 40 flights that reached Minsk from Istanbul, Damascus and Dubai. And other thing is that flying to Belarus is easy to enter Europe instead of taking a dangerous boat trip through Mediterranean Sea. Asylum seekers merely had to take flight to Belarus and use a car to reach the border, after which countries like Poland, Lithuania and Latvia would be accessible by foot. In all, there is also a charge against Belarus President Lukashenko. The primary accusation against Lukashenko that he is orchestrating the border crisis by forcing huge groups of refugees already in Belarus to illegally enter Poland by snatching their phones and belongings and dropping them off at the Polish border. Upon arrival, they are being pushed to the border and forced to make an illegal entry in the European Union, according to Peter Stano, a spokesperson for the European Commission. Lukashenko denies this, but the ground reports have made it clear that these people, including women and children, are neither being allowed entry into the Poland nor being allowed to go back to Belarus. Nobody is letting us get in anywhere, Belarus or Poland, a 33-year-old woman told to BBC on a video call. In October alone, there were more than 10,000 cases of migrants trying to illegally enter Poland from Belarus. Around 23,000 similar cases have been registered in 2021 according to statistics provided by a Deutsche Welle report. The pictures and videos that emerged on social media about Monday's event are just an escalation of what has been happening for the many weeks now. But neither Poland nor Belarus shows any signs of backing down. Before we get to why Poland and the EU believes that Belarus is trying to get the EU sanction removed, it is important to understand what type of a president Alexander Lukashenko is and why his government has been sanctioned. I am the last dictator in Europe. Those are the Lukashenko's own words during a rare interview to Reuters. The self-styled dictator has been ruling Belarus with an iron hand since 1994 and has been accused of indulging in many activities that go against the spirit of democracy and human rights, leading to deterioration of relations between Belarus and the EU. He is also very close allied to Vladimir Putin, which doesn't come as a surprise considering the hostility between the EU and Russia. During the last presidential election for his sixth term as a president, Lukashenko was accused to widespread electoral fraud. While the opposition presidential candidate Sviatlana Tikhanovskaya claimed that she had won around two-thirds of total votes, she even created a council to ensure a peaceful transfer of power within the Belarus government. But Lukashenko didn't budge from the presidential throne. He instead surveyed the pro-democracy demonstrations that were happening on the ground from his helicopter and ordered his forces to brutally crack down on the anti-government protesters, Reuters reported in a series of investigative articles. The inevitable blame game. Yes, there is a game going blame between the nation to blame one another. The word from Brussels, the official capital of the EU, is that the Belarusian dictator is acting in a retaliation against EU sanction in what has been described as a new form of hybrid warfare. Lukashenko has of course denied having any such motivation. He instead told a Belarusian state news agency that he was not a madman, and while he wouldn't kowtow to the EU, he didn't want the border crisis to escalate into the full-blown conflict that inevitably lured Russia in support of Belarus. His defense ministry instead has blamed the politician in Warsaw for causing this crisis by stationing thousands of troops along the border and violating bilateral agreements in the process. Poland's Prime Minister Havel has pointed all his guns at Moscow. Russia in turn has praised Lukashenko's responsible handling of the chaos. Poland has also said that the Belarus is trying to provoke a major incident in order to manufacture a full-blown conflict. Belarus wants to cause a major incident, preferably with a shot fired and casualties, Deputy Foreign Minister told media sources on Monday, reported to the BBC. While the blame game was foreseeable, the suffering of all those stranded at border using makeshift tents to survive the brutal cold continues. Even the spokesperson for the UN Refugee Agency, Saiba Manto, said in a statement that using refugees, asylum seekers and the migrants to achieve political ends is unacceptable and must stop. As for sanctions, European diplomats told the Reuters on Wednesday that the EU had almost sealed the deal for a new round of sanctions on the Lukashenko government. If the reversal of sanction is what Lukashenko desired from the very beginning of the pandemonium, he apparently isn't get it. But now what's the next step to be taken? The crisis has created such a situation for asylum seekers at the border that wherever they go, they face repercussion. If they turn around to go back to Minsk, not only do they have to go through dense forest and survive extremely harsh weather conditions, they will be most likely be detained and beaten up by Belarusian officers, as described by many migrants during interview with the BBC and Reuters, or they will forced to turn around again back towards Poland. If they stay where they are at the Polish border, facing heavily guarded troops and barbed wires, they risk either dying in a clash or dying of a cold and hunger. And even if Poland take them in, they are most likely going to be kept in a detained center. A BBC reports from October details how more than 10,000 migrants were kept in detention centers in the Baltic countries Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, along with Poland and Germany, in what has been described as a barbaric experience. The only solution to the crisis seems to be dependent on Lukashenko himself. If he isn't responsible for the chaos as his outright denial suggests, then he must take back the refugees stranded at Polish border since they are originally coming from Belarus. But if he is indeed forcing an influx of refugees toward the EU as Poland and other actors are suggesting, then only he can bring an end to this tragic episode of human suffering.